So the US hot sauce market is estimated to be around $1.5 billion as of 2021. The largest in that business is Tabasco, which is made by McIlhenny, a family-owned company. Second is McCormick, which is publicly traded. They own Frank's RedHot, and they also own Cholula, which they purchased for $800 million in late 2020. And then after that, we have Huy Fong, which is around, I think, 9 or 10% of the market. So they're still much smaller than the two biggest players in the market, but they have grown a lot in the last 2 decades or so until now. So Huy Fong Foods is a company that's best known for its biggest product, Sriracha. They're based in Orlando, California. They were founded by David Tran, who came to the US as a Vietnamese immigrant in 1979. And their biggest product is Sriracha. That's what everyone knows them for, the iconic rooster logo on the bottle with the green squeeze cap. They also have 2 other products that they make. One is called Sambal Lelek, which is very similar to the Sriracha hot sauce, but it's not blended. And then chili garlic, which is very similar, but also without the vinegar and the sugar. So what's really interesting about Huy Fong is that, it's never done any direct advertising. It's only pretty much grown through word of mouth. Initially, its main customers were Chinese American, Vietnamese American communities, restaurants, markets in LA and Southern California. And it's just spread, organically since then. You can actually sort of see its growth based on the factories that it's had. It started out with that 2,500 square foot facility in Chinatown. In 1987, they moved to a much larger one. He eventually expanded that to around, more than 200,000 square feet. And then in 2013, they moved to what is now their main facility in Irwindale, east of LA. That's 650,000 square feet. They can make up to 18,000 bottles of Sriracha an hour. Sriracha is now everywhere, right? It's really become a cult product, and it's a very unique example of a product that has gone from being, I guess, fairly niche initially to being so widely used to the point that it's now the 3rd largest hot sauce in the country, according to market research firm IBISWorld. And it's only behind Tabasco, which has been around since 1868. And then Frank's RedHot, which is owned by McCormick, right? A publicly traded spices giant. So for a company like Huy Fong that was only founded in 1980 to reach that level, competing with a company that's got, more than 150 years of history in Tabasco and then a, massive publicly traded corporation is really astounding. So David Tran, he's the founder of Huy Fong Foods. He first came to the US in the summer of 1979. He was born and grew up in Vietnam. During the Vietnam War, he was in the South Vietnamese army. He didn't fight, but he was drafted to it like everyone of his age was at the time. He had actually started producing a hot sauce using the chilies that were grown on his brother's land in South Vietnam after the war ended. In 1978, there was a lot of pressure from the Communist Vietnamese government on citizens of Chinese origin, like David Tran and his family, to leave the country. And so he and his son and his wife, as well as other members of his family, ended up leaving Vietnam as refugees. They had to leave on different trawlers. He left on a freighter called Huy Fong in December 1978, which is actually how he got the name of the company eventually. All that he brought with him was a locket and 100 ounces of gold that he hid in cans of condensed milk so that they couldn't be taken by the communist authorities. He landed up in Hong Kong after a brief journey on the freighter. In Hong Kong, he was at a refugee camp for 8 months. And then in the summer of 1979, he was resettled to Boston. However, Boston was cold. They didn't really end up liking it that much. And his brother-in-law had actually resettled to LA. He's mentioned that he would call his brother-in-law, and his brother-in-law had told him there were chilies available in the markets in LA, which he was not able to find in Boston. So they ended up moving to LA in January of 1980. That's when he started looking for freshly grown chilies, jalapenos in local markets in LA. He sold some of the gold he had brought with him to open up a 2,500 square foot factory in Chinatown, started producing the hot sauce that we now know as Sriracha, which was similar to the recipe he had been making back in Vietnam. In the first 2 months of business in 1980, the company brought in $2,300. And he would actually sell the bottles of hot sauce out of a blue Chevy van, driving around LA to different Vietnamese and Chinese markets to sell it. So Huy Fong, I think because it started out as a product that was mainly used by various types of Asian restaurants and Asian communities in the U.S. It sort of grew out organically from those communities and those customers. It wasn't sort of advertised or pitched to a lot of different places. It's used by a lot of sushi restaurants around the U.S. There was actually a study made in 2015 by the NPD Group, which showed that nearly 1 in 10 households in the U.S. stock Sriracha, and actually higher than that if you look at households with people under the age of 35. It's also kind of iconic, right? Everyone knows the rooster logo, the squeeze cap. It's sort of dependable as a very spicy hot sauce you'll find anywhere. And it's interesting, there was a documentary made in 2013 on Sriracha by Griffin Hammond. He talks to all these people who are big fans, and a lot of people don't even know that Sriracha is made in the US, right? If you look at the bottle, it's written in Vietnamese and Chinese. The people have this idea that it's more authentic because they might believe that it comes from outside the US. It's not, right? It's a product made by David Tran and his family, he's American. But obviously he came from Vietnam, he started making it in Vietnam. It has that authenticity and that simple recipe, and the ingredients that he's used have never changed. The recipe's always been the same, and you know what you're getting when you're getting Sriracha, right? It's very identifiable, and they focus on that product, right? They also have sambal alec and chili garlic, but they're a much smaller sort of source of revenue for them. It's really mainly Sriracha that they sell, and they're so highly identified with that product. Over the years, Huy Fong has had to deal with some challenges, including some lawsuits, shortages of chilies, and also counterfeiters that have tried to sell their product illegally. One of the first ones that sort of got a lot of news coverage was when the city of Irwindale, which is where their facility is located, sued Huy Fong for basically odors that the factory was emitting. And this ended up going on for a little while. Huy Fong actually opened up their factory to the whole community. They started doing factory tours. Eventually, the city dropped its lawsuit. It's interesting, this actually got a lot of coverage around the US. Senator Ted Cruz actually asked Huy Fong if they wanted to move to Texas to get away from Irwindale. That didn't end up happening. And then another lawsuit that happened was in 2021. Huy Fong used to have an exclusive chili producer up until a few years ago called Underwood Ranches, based in California, and they would produce all of the jalapenos that Huy Fong needed. There was a lawsuit over sort of the agreements that they'd had with Underwood Ranches. The lawsuit has since concluded. And what's interesting about sort of the production process is that the chili growing season is pretty short. And so if the harvest goes bad, that means that they're not gonna have enough chilies to produce the sauce for the rest of the year. And so they had all the production with this one producer. Now they have multiple producers, I believe in California and in northern Mexico. So that's in the past now, but that was a major challenge for them in terms of having to deal with that lawsuit, and also on sort of how they were gonna get their chili production. More recently, in 2022, there was a severe chili shortage in the spring. Huy Fong actually sent out a notice to a lot of their customers saying that it was going to severely impact their ability to produce any Sriracha. And so there's a lot of news articles around the US about the Sriracha shortage. I actually spoke to an analyst who was looking at Nielsen data that showed that sales initially spiked after this announced as people were trying to hoard all the Sriracha. That's passed now. They've been able to sort of get back to regular production. And also the fact now they have sort of a diversified sourcing for their chilies. But when there's severe weather events like happened in 2022, and there's only one chili growing season, that can sort of severely impact how much of you're able to produce for the rest of the year. David Tran, by all accounts, is a very humble person. He is fairly press shy. He has done a few interviews over the years. But what's really interesting is one of his main phrases I've seen a lot that he said to me also over email is that he's just focused on making a rich man's hot sauce at a poor man's price. He's not changing the ingredients. He's just trying to keep making the same product and make more of it as long as more people want it. He's also said in the past that his American dream was never to become a billionaire. He's said in the past that he's received offers over time to buy the company, and he's not interested. He just wants to pass it on to his family and to keep growing it as much as possible. And that's what's happened over the last 40 plus years that the company's been in business. Especially the last 20 years, the company's grown so much. And in some years they've grown even by around 20% each year in some years. It's this phenomenal growth and a very humble backstory, right? An immigrant refugee from Vietnam built this company, grew it organically, and is not interested in selling it or bringing out new products or changing the recipe that has brought the company and the family so much success.